Do you really think I don't know what you've been doing? The voice of Victoria Ashford descended from the top of the grand, sweeping staircase. Each word a perfectly polished stone dropped into the cavernous silence of the marble hall. It was a voice laden with the easy, thoughtless arrogance that only decades of immense, unearned privilege can build. It was a voice that had never been denied, never been questioned, and certainly never been challenged, especially not by the help. Running out of here every day at 5 o'clock on the dot, refusing a ride from the driver, even in the rain, lying about where you're going. Leticia Santos stood motionless in the grand arched doorway, hand still clutching the brass key she had just used to let herself in. At 32, she had learned that stillness was her greatest weapon, her most effective shield against the casual cruelties of people like Victoria Ashford. She did not turn around. She did not offer an excuse. She did not show any sign of the frantic, furious pounding of her own heart. She simply took a slow, deep, and almost imperceptible breath, and she smiled. It was a small, private smile, a smile that held enough secrets, enough patience, and enough righteous anger to bring empires crashing to the ground. "May I ask what you're talking about, Mrs. Ashford?" she asked, her voice as soft as velvet, but as firm and as unyielding as steel. Victoria descended the marble stairs, a queen descending to her throne of judgment. Her movements were a study in practiced grace, her pink Chanel suit a vibrant, aggressive slash of color against the cool white marble of her home. The suit, Leticia knew, had cost more than she earned in 6 months. It was a deliberate contrast to Leticia's own simple, functional uniform, a difference in station that Victoria made a point of flaunting whenever possible. "Don't play dumb with me, Leticia," Victoria said, stopping just a few inches from her, close enough for Leticia to smell the expensive, cloying scent of her perfume. "For 3 years, you have taken care of my son as if you were a saint. You've been perfect, almost too perfect, but lately," she paused, her sharp, intelligent eyes narrowing. "Lately, you've been different. Distant. You're hiding something, and I want to know what it is." What Victoria didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that Leticia had spent the last 6 months, and indeed the last 3 years, documenting every single moment of life inside this beautiful, sterile, and morally bankrupt cage. Every racist conversation disguised as a joke, every despicable, condescending comment about the help, every subtle, soul-crushing humiliation that this family considered to be a normal, acceptable part of their daily lives. The small, state-of-the-art digital recorder in her pocket, a device she had purchased with her meager savings, had captured things that would make even the Ashfords' closest, most jaded friends recoil in shock. "Perhaps you're imagining things," Leticia replied, her voice still infuriatingly calm. She adjusted the strap of her worn leather purse with a stillness that made Victoria's perfectly sculpted brow furrow in irritation. "I always leave at the same time, and I always leave for the same reason." "What reason?" Victoria crossed, her arms a gesture that her diamond-encrusted bracelets transformed into a glittering, ostentatious display of power. "Because I have asked you 3 times, and every single time, you changed the subject." Leticia finally turned to face her employer fully. Her dark, intelligent eyes met Victoria's, and for the first time in 3 years, she did not look away. She held her gaze with an intensity, a directness that made the older woman involuntarily, almost imperceptibly, take a half-step back. "Do you really want to know, Victoria?" There was something in her tone, a quiet, dangerous promise that some doors, once opened, could never again be closed. Victoria hesitated for a fraction of a second, a flicker of uncertainty in her cold, blue eyes. But her pride, that massive, unassailable fortress she had spent a lifetime building, quickly reasserted itself. "I demand to know," she snapped. "This is my house. You are responsible for my son, and I have a right to know where my employee goes every single afternoon." "Employee," Leticia repeated the word slowly, as if tasting it, exploring its bitter, metallic flavor. "All right, Victoria." The use of her first name, the deliberate, pointed dropping of the deferential Mrs. Ashford, made the millionaire's eyes widen in shock. "If you're so intensely curious, why don't you follow me tomorrow? I'm sure you'll find out exactly what you need to know." The challenge, bold and utterly unexpected, hung in the air between them like a ticking time bomb. Victoria felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation, a cold tendril of unease snaking its way down her spine. It wasn't fear, she tried to convince herself. People like her were not afraid of their maids. It was just surprise indignation. Leticia had never spoken to her like this before. She had never shown anything but a quiet, respectful, and deeply satisfying submission. "Maybe I will," Victoria murmured, but her voice had lost some of its previous strength, its absolute, unquestioned authority. Leticia smiled again, and this time it was a smile that promised revelations, a smile that promised a reckoning. "Great," she said. "I'll see you tomorrow then." And with that, she turned and walked out the grand, imposing front door, leaving Victoria Ashford standing alone in the vast, silent marble hall, with the deeply unsettling feeling that she had just accepted an invitation to a game whose rules she did not understand, a game she was not at all certain she could win. Outside, Leticia unlocked her simple 10-speed bicycle from the rack near the service entrance. She got on and began to pedal away into the golden light of the setting sun. She carried with her 3 years of silent humiliation, a purse containing a treasure trove of damning evidence, and a meticulously crafted plan that was about to turn the Ashfords' perfect, privileged life into a pile of public, ignominious rubble. What Victoria would discover the next day would not only change her perspective on her nanny, it would force her to confront the ugly, rotten truth about herself, about her world, and about the terrible price some people pay for underestimating the quiet, invisible women who clean their homes. The next day, Victoria woke up with a strange, sour taste in her mouth. It wasn't fear. She repeated the mantra to herself as she sipped her morning espresso, served on a silver tray by a different, more appropriately deferential member of the household staff. People like Victoria Ashford were not afraid of their maids. It was irritation, a deep, profound irritation at being challenged, at being spoken to as an equal, by someone she considered to be so completely, so fundamentally, under her control. At 4:45 p.m., she was already in position. She sat behind the wheel of her black Mercedes-Benz, a machine of silent Teutonic perfection, parked 2 blocks down from her own mansion, under the shade of a large leafy oak tree. She felt ridiculous, like a character in a cheap detective novel, but her curiosity, and her wounded pride, had gotten the better of her. At 5 p.m. sharp, she saw Leticia emerge from the service entrance. She got on her bicycle and began to pedal, her movements steady and determined. Victoria started the car and followed at a safe, discreet distance. "Where the hell does this woman go every day?" she muttered to herself, as she watched Leticia navigate the manicured, tree-lined streets of her exclusive suburban enclave. The journey took 40 minutes. It took them out of the pristine, predictable world of wealth and privilege that Victoria inhabited, and into a neighborhood that she recognized only from the grim, sensationalized reports on the local news. It was a part of the city she would never ever willingly set foot in. The houses were smaller, closer together, their lawns less manicured, their paint peeling. Leticia finally stopped in front of a small, unassuming storefront office, tucked between a laundromat and a bodega. A discreet, simple sign above the door read, "Community Legal Aid Center." Victoria frowned. Legal aid? Why on earth would a nanny need a lawyer? Through the plate glass window, she watched as Leticia entered the office. She was greeted warmly by a man in a simple, slightly rumpled suit, a black man with kind, intelligent eyes who hugged her as if they were old friends. They sat down at a large, cluttered table covered with papers, and Victoria watched, her suspicion hardening into a cold certainty as Leticia handed the man something from her purse. It looked like a small, electronic device, a recorder. "Interesting," Victoria whispered, her fingers flying across the screen of her smartphone as she took a series of discreet, damning photographs. She immediately sent them to her best friend, Catherine, along with a running commentary. "Catherine, you will not believe where my nanny goes after work. Some cheap storefront law office in the ghetto. She's probably planning some ridiculous lawsuit against me." Catherine's reply was instantaneous. "Be careful, Vic. Fire her before she can cause any real trouble. You know how vindictive these people can be when they feel they've been wronged." Victoria smiled, a small, dismissive curl of her lip. It all made perfect, logical sense now. Leticia, the quiet, seemingly devoted nanny, was just another grifter. She was probably gathering evidence for some fictitious employment lawsuit, inventing discrimination where none existed, trying to extort a payday from a wealthy family. "People like her always try to turn kindness into exploitation," Victoria typed back. "I gave her a job. I gave her a room in my house, I feed her, and now, she wants more." It's so typical. As she sat there, stewing in her own indignation, Victoria's mind began to race, replaying the past 3 years, recontextualizing every interaction, every conversation, through this new, cynical lens. She remembered the small, seemingly insignificant moments that now, in the light of her growing paranoia, took on a sinister new meaning. There was the time, 2 summers ago, when her son, James, had asked why Leticia couldn't use the family pool on a sweltering August afternoon. Because she's working, darling, Victoria had explained, her voice a model of patient reason. And people who work for us, they have different rules. Leticia, who had been standing nearby, tidying up the pool toys, had heard everything. She hadn't said a word. She had just lowered her eyes and continued her work. At the time, Victoria had seen it as a sign of proper, respectful submission. Now, she saw it as a silent, resentful documentation of a perceived slight. Or the time she had found Leticia eating her lunch in the small, cramped maid's room off the kitchen, instead of in the main, sun-drenched breakfast nook. I prefer to eat here, Mrs. Ashford, Leticia had explained, her voice quiet. But Victoria knew the truth. She had made it clear, from the very first day, that certain areas of the house were reserved for the family. She had established the boundaries, and Leticia's quiet retreat to the maid's room, which had once seemed like a sign of her understanding her place, now seemed like a passive-aggressive performance of martyrdom. And then there were the dinner parties, the casual, careless conversations she and her friends would have, their voices carrying through the house as Leticia silently poured their wine, refilled their water glasses, cleared their plates. They would talk openly about the problem, with servants these days, about their unreliability, their sense of entitlement. You give them an inch, and they take a mile, Victoria used to say, a familiar refrain among her social set. She had always assumed that Leticia, like the expensive furniture, was simply a part of the background, incapable of understanding, let alone remembering, their sophisticated, nuanced conversations. An hour later, Leticia emerged from the legal aid office, carrying a large, thick manila folder. Victoria followed her back to the house, her mind a buzzing hive of conspiracy theories and righteous anger. When she got home, she waited a few minutes, then entered the house through the front door, affecting the breezy, carefree air of someone who had just returned from a relaxing afternoon at the spa. Leticia, she called out, her voice sharp, as she heard the nanny in the kitchen preparing dinner for James. We need to talk. Leticia appeared in the doorway, that same infuriatingly calm smile on her face, but Victoria could swear there was something different in her eyes now. A new confidence, a quiet, almost imperceptible glint of triumph. Where did you go today? Victoria asked directly, crossing her arms, the diamonds on her wrist flashing, in the light of the chandelier. The same place I go every day, Mrs. Ashford. And that is exactly where, may I ask? Leticia tilted her head slightly, a gesture of almost playful curiosity. Didn't you follow me and find out? The question caught Victoria completely off guard. The blood rushed to her face. How could she possibly have known? She was sure she had been discreet, that she had kept her distance. I don't know what you're talking about, Victoria lied, but her voice was weak, unconvincing, even to her own ears. Of course you don't, Leticia replied, and for the first time in 3 years, Victoria detected a clear, unmistakable note of irony in her voice. But since you're so curious, perhaps tomorrow you'll want to ask the right question. And what question would that be? Victoria snapped. Leticia's smile widened. It was not her usual, submissive, eager-to-please smile. This was something else entirely. It was a smile that held a promise of a reckoning. The question isn't where I'm going, Mrs. Ashford, she said. The question is what I'm taking with me when I go. Victoria felt a genuine, bone-deep chill run down her spine. There was something in the way Leticia had said it, a quiet, absolute certainty that suggested knowledge. Knowledge about things that Victoria would much rather keep hidden. I don't like riddles, Leticia. I know, replied the nanny, adjusting the strap of her bag. You've always preferred things to be direct, simple, black and white. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. But sometimes, the truth is a little more complicated than that. Sometimes, the truth needs to be built slowly, piece by piece, until the complete picture is finally clear enough for everyone to see. That night, Victoria could not sleep. She tossed and turned in her massive silk-sheeted bed, her mind racing. At 2 o'clock in the morning, she called Catherine. She knows I followed her, she whispered into the phone, her voice a frantic, terrified hiss, and she spoke to me in a way. I don't know, Catherine. It was as if she knew something about me. Fire her, Vic, Catherine advised, her voice thick with sleep. Fire her tomorrow, before it's too late. But Victoria knew, with a sinking, sickening feeling in the pit of her stomach, that it might already be too late. Firing Leticia now would be an admission of defeat, an admission of fear. And people like Victoria Ashford did not admit defeat. Not to people like Leticia, not before they found out exactly what kind of game was being played. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that every despicable word, every racist comment disguised as a joke, every subtle, soul-crushing humiliation of the past 3 years had been carefully, meticulously documented, and that the manila folder Leticia had carried out of that humble legal aid office contained much more than just papers. It contained the power to turn the Ashfords' perfect, privileged life into a pile of public, ignominious rubble. Every suspicion Victoria had, every paranoid thought, every act of intimidation she was now plotting, was only fueling a silent, righteous determination that was being forged by the very arrogance she used to try to break it. She was, in her blindness, writing her own sentence of defeat. The next morning, Victoria woke with an ironclad, desperate resolve. She would not be intimidated. She would not be played. She would seize control of this situation. She called her personal assistant before she had even gotten out of bed. "Rachel," she snapped, "I need you to do a complete, deep-dive background check on my nanny, Leticia Santos. I want to know everything: where she was born, where she went to school, her family, her previous addresses, any court cases, any parking tickets, anything and everything you can find." "Is there anything in particular I should be looking for, Mrs. Ashford?" Rachel asked. "Just precautions," Victoria replied, trying to keep her voice casual. "These people, you know, they sometimes have ulterior motives that we don't notice at first." While Victoria was plotting in her master suite, just a few feet away, in the sun-drenched kitchen, Leticia was preparing little James's breakfast with her usual maddeningly calm demeanor. But inside her purse, carefully hidden among the tissues and a half-eaten granola bar, was the small digital recorder that had just captured every single word of Victoria's phone conversation with her assistant. "Good morning, James, my love," she said sweetly, helping the 6-year-old boy into his chair at the breakfast table. "How about some scrambled eggs today?" "Leticia," the boy asked, his voice filled with the innocent, unfiltered curiosity of his age, "why does Mummy talk differently when you're not in the room?" The question made Leticia pause for a moment, her hand hovering over the carton. "Of eggs? What do you mean, sweetie?" "She uses words that you taught me are not nice words," he explained. "Yesterday she was on the phone with Aunt Catherine, and she said that people like you always want more than they deserve." Leticia knelt down, bringing herself to the boy's eye level, her own voice calm and gentle. "And what do you think about that, James?" "I think she's wrong," he said, his lower lip trembling slightly. "You're the nicest person I know." At that exact moment, Victoria swept into the kitchen, still in her silk robe, her cell phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, Catherine, exactly," she was saying, her voice a sharp, angry hiss. "She's obviously collecting evidence for some ridiculous, trumped-up lawsuit. These people, they always do that when they realize the party's over." Asterisk, she didn't realize that her son and her nanny could hear every single word, nor did she notice the small, almost invisible device that Leticia had discreetly activated in the pocket of her purse. "I have to leave early today," Victoria announced coldly after she had hung up the phone. "I have a meeting with my lawyer. About domestic matters, of course, Mrs. Ashford," Leticia replied. "James will be well looked after." Victoria studied Leticia's face for a long moment, searching for any sign of nervousness, of guilt, of fear. She found only that, the same disconcerting, unreadable serenity. 2 hours later, in the cluttered, chaotic, but deeply welcoming office of Marcus Thompson, a brilliant and passionate lawyer who specialized in labor and civil rights cases, Leticia emptied the contents of her manila folder onto the desk. It was not just recordings, there were screenshots of text messages between Victoria and her friends, messages that Leticia had discreetly photographed from Victoria's unlocked phone while she was in the shower. There were photographs of moments of casual, thoughtless humiliation that she had managed to document over the years, and there were videos, recorded on a series of tiny, hidden cameras that a sympathetic former employee had helped her install. Videos of Victoria when she thought she was alone, her mask of polite society slipped away, revealing the ugly, prejudiced reality beneath. "Leticia, this is—" Marcus stopped, his voice filled with a mixture of horror and professional glee. He was looking at 3 years of a meticulously documented, systematic campaign of racial and psychological abuse. "You documented everything, every insult," Leticia replied, her voice firm, but heavy with the contained pain of 3 long years. "Every racist comment disguised as a joke, every moment she treated me like I was less than human. And it wasn't just me," Marcus, she does this to everyone she considers inferior. The gardeners, the delivery people, anyone who isn't a part of her exclusive, white, wealthy social circle. Marcus picked up the transcript of the most recent recording, the one from that morning's phone call. She literally refers to you as these people and accuses you of plotting against her. The ironic thing, Leticia smiled a bitter, weary smile, is that I am plotting something. It's just not what she thinks. And what about your real background? Marcus asked, leaning forward, his eyes sharp with anticipation. When do you plan to reveal that particular bombshell? Leticia took a deep breath. For 3 years, she had hidden her true identity. She had hidden the fact that she had not one, but 2 university degrees, one in child psychology and one in law, as well as a master's degree in social policy from Columbia. She had taken this job, this demeaning, soul-crushing job, not out of desperate financial need, but as part of a deep, immersive, and highly unorthodox academic research project on the nature of domestic racism and classism in high-income American families. Not yet, she said. First, I want her to dig her own grave just a little bit deeper. Across town, Victoria was sitting in the opulent, wood-paneled office of her personal attorney, David Sterling, a 60-year-old man who represented exclusively the families of the city's social and financial elite. I need to fire my nanny, Victoria explained, without giving her any grounds for a wrongful termination lawsuit. I suspect she's gathering information for some kind of false legal action. Based on what, exactly? Sterling asked, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Suspicious behavior, visits to cheap, storefront law offices, a sudden, and frankly, insubordinate, change in her attitude. Also, Victoria hesitated, may have made some comments over the years, comments that could be misinterpreted. What kind of comments, Victoria? Oh, nothing major, she said, waving a dismissive hand. Just observations about cultural differences, things that any reasonable person would understand as casual remarks. But you know how sensitive these people can be about everything. Sterling watched her carefully over the top of his half-moon glasses. Victoria, I need you to be more specific. If there is any possibility of a discrimination claim. It wasn't discrimination, Victoria interrupted, irritated. It was realism. I pay her salary. I provide her with housing and food. If she's not satisfied with the conditions of her employment, she should look for another job, not make up problems where they don't exist. Meanwhile, back at Marcus's office, Leticia was showing him the final item in her collection of evidence. It was a detailed, heartbreaking diary she had kept for all 3 years. A diary that recorded not only the incidents of discrimination she had personally endured, but also the emotional and psychological impact she had observed on little James. The child is being raised to normalize this kind of behavior, Leticia explained, her voice now filled with a genuine, profound sadness. James is a good, sweet, and intelligent kid, but he's already starting to repeat the phrases he hears from his mother. Yesterday he asked me why I couldn't use the pool like his mother's friends do. He's learning that there are different rules for different kinds of people. Marcus closed his eyes, clearly disturbed. And you have all of this documented, every conversation, every moment she spoke about me as if I weren't human. Every time she made a point of reminding me of my place in that house. Leticia, Marcus said, his voice now filled with a new, steely resolve. With this material, we can do much more than just a simple labor lawsuit. This documents a systematic pattern of racial discrimination, of creating a hostile work environment, and, perhaps most damningly, of the potential for inflicting long-term psychological damage on a minor. We can make this public. We can expose not only Victoria, but her entire toxic social network. Leticia nodded slowly. That's exactly what I want, she said. I want her to face the consequences of every cruel word, every look of contempt. Every single moment she thought her wealth and her privilege protected her from the consequences of her actions. That afternoon, when Leticia returned to the Ashford mansion, she found Victoria waiting for her in the living room, a tense, triumphant expression on her face. We need to talk, Victoria said, gesturing for Leticia to sit on the smaller, less comfortable sofa, a silent final assertion of her dominance. It's about my visit to the law office, isn't it? Leticia asked directly, surprising Victoria with her boldness. How did you? Because you're not as discreet as you think you are. Victoria, Leticia replied. The black Mercedes parked 2 blocks away was pretty obvious. Victoria felt the blood rush to her face. So, you admit it. You're plotting something against me. Not against you, Victoria, Leticia said, her voice calm and even, for justice. There's a difference, although I imagine that's a difficult concept for someone like you to understand. Someone like me. Victoria stood up, indignant. And what exactly does that mean? Leticia smiled. It was not the submissive, deferential smile Victoria was used to seeing. This was a smile that held the weight of 3 years of patience, a smile that was about to turn into a weapon. It means someone who has never had to face the consequences of her own words and actions, she said. Someone who confuses privilege with superiority. How dare you speak to me that way? I implore you. I pay your salary, and Leticia replied, her voice still quiet, but now ringing with an undeniable power. I take care of your son. With love, and with dedication. Despite every veiled insult, every racist comment disguised as a casual observation, every single moment you have made me feel less than human. Victoria went pale. I never, what? Leticia interrupted, her voice sharp as a razor. Never told your friends that people like me always want more than they deserve. Never commented that you should hire someone more suitable to take care of James. Never suggested that I should be grateful to work in such a refined home. Every word Leticia spoke hit Victoria like a physical blow. She had said exactly those things 1,000 times, but she had always assumed that Leticia, the maid, the nanny, the background furniture of her life, either didn't hear, or didn't understand, the implications. You were spying on me. No, Victoria, Leticia replied. I was protecting myself, and I was documenting every single moment that you showed the world who you really are. Behind that carefully constructed facade of education and sophistication, Victoria felt the floor collapse beneath her feet. What do you want? She whispered, her voice a ragged, desperate thing. Money. I'll double your salary, triple it. Leticia slowly got up, picked up her purse, and walked toward the door. What I want, Victoria, she said, cannot be bought. I want justice. And tomorrow morning, you, and the rest of the world, are going to find out exactly what that means. When the door closed behind Leticia, Victoria remained alone in the room, and for the first time in her pampered, privileged life, she felt the bitter, terrifying taste of true fear. Not the fear of losing money, or of losing social status, but the fear of finally, irrevocably, having to face the consequences of the person she had chosen to be. Outside, Leticia got on her bike, a feeling of profound, liberating freedom washing over her. Tomorrow all the masks would come off, and Victoria Ashford would discover that underestimating someone based on the color of their skin and the uniform they wear was the single biggest, most catastrophic mistake of her life. The game was over, and checkmate was just hours away. The next morning, Victoria Ashford woke with an ironclad, desperate determination. She would not be intimidated. She would not be played. She would seize control of this situation. She would fire the nanny, pay her a generous severance to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and this entire sordid affair would be buried. At 8 a.m., she was already dressed in a severe, grey power suit, standing by the front gate, a letter of termination and a checkbook in her hand, waiting. When Leticia arrived, not on her bicycle, but in a simple, late-model sedan, Victoria was momentarily thrown off. Leticia got out of the passenger side, and the man driving, Marcus Thompson, got out as well. He carried a thick leather briefcase. Don't even come in, Victoria announced, her voice a sharp, commanding bark as they approached the gate. Your services are no longer required. This letter formalizes your immediate dismissal. My lawyer will be in touch regarding a severance package, contingent on a signed NDA. Leticia accepted the envelope with that same infuriatingly serene smile. Are you sure you want to do this today, Victoria? Absolutely, Victoria snapped. And it's Mrs. Ashford to you. Actually, Leticia said, opening her own purse and taking out a crisp, professional-looking folder. I prefer it's just Victoria. Or, better yet, defendant number 1. Victoria felt the blood drain from her veins. What are you talking about? I'm talking about Dr. Leticia Santos, she said, handing Victoria a business card. The card was thick, expensive cardstock, the lettering embossed in a simple, elegant font. Dr. Leticia Santos, Ph.D., Columbia University, Masters in Civil Law, Harvard Law School. Underneath it read, Specialist in Racial Discrimination and Labor Rights Violations. Victoria stared at the card as if it were a poisonous snake. That's impossible, she stammered. You're just a black nanny, Leticia finished for her. A maid, someone who should be grateful to work in your refined home, she smiled. For 3 years, Victoria, I have meticulously, legally, and comprehensively documented every racist word that has come out of your mouth, every despicable comment, every single humiliation you thought I wouldn't understand or wouldn't remember. You deceived me, Victoria whispered, her mind reeling. You lied about who you were. I never lied, Leticia corrected her. I just didn't reveal my academic background. I was conducting ethnographic research for my doctoral thesis. The title, she added, a glint of steel in her eye, is The Banality of Evil, a case study of systemic domestic racism in high-income American families. You, Victoria, are my perfect case study. It doesn't matter who you are, Victoria said, trying to regain some semblance of control. You can't prove anything. Leticia took a small digital recorder out of her bag. Want to hear your conversation with your lawyer, David Sterling, yesterday? The part where you say that people like me are too sensitive, and that your racist comments were just realism. She pressed a button, and Victoria's own voice, crisp and clear, filled the quiet morning air. It wasn't discrimination, it was just realism. I pay her salary, I provide her with housing and food. Stop it, Victoria screamed, trying to grab the recorder. Or would you prefer this one? Leticia played another file. Victoria's voice again, this time on the phone with her friend Catherine. These people, they always want more than they deserve. Victoria recoiled, her face pale with horror. What do you want? She whispered. Money. I'll double your salary. Triple it. I want justice, Leticia said. And at 10 o'clock this morning, a special investigative report will be airing on Channel 7 News. It's called The Silent Racism of the Elite. It's an exclusive, featuring 3 years of my recordings, photographs, and documents, showing exactly how millionaire families like yours treat their black domestic employees. You can't do that, Victoria breathed. I already have, Leticia replied. My lawyer Marcus Thompson has been working with a journalist for the past 2 weeks. Your friends, Catherine, Rebecca, Samantha, they're all featured in the report as well. It turns out, I wasn't the only employee they underestimated. Victoria felt her legs go weak. My God, my reputation, my husband's business, the contracts. Your contracts have already started to be cancelled, Leticia informed her calmly. Premier Holdings, your husband's biggest client, terminated their agreement an hour ago after their CEO was given an advanced screening of the report. The charitable foundation you chair has already removed your name from their board, and the country club, well, they've asked for your membership card back. Victoria collapsed against the cold iron of the gate, sobbing, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her in a matter of minutes. Why, she wept. Why are you doing this to me? Leticia knelt beside her, her voice firm but, for the first time, not entirely without a sliver of pity. Because for 3 years, you treated me like I was less than human, she said. Because you laughed at my background, you mocked my dignity, and you genuinely believed that your wealth and your skin color protected you from the consequences of your words. You never saw me, Victoria. You only ever saw a stereotype. I never meant to. You never wanted to take responsibility for what you said and did. Leticia corrected her. Every racist comment you normalized in front of your son. Every moment you made me feel inferior. Every time you talked about me as if I were your property. All of that has consequences, Victoria. Victoria looked up at Leticia through her tears. What's going to happen now? Now, Leticia said, standing up. You are going to learn something I have known my entire life. Actions have consequences, and underestimating someone because of the color of their skin was the single biggest, most catastrophic mistake of your privileged life. She turned to leave. Oh, and about little James, she added, her voice softening. Don't worry, I'm sure he will learn a great deal from watching his mother finally have to deal with the consequences of her own prejudices. As Leticia and Marcus got back in their car and drove away, Leticia could see Victoria's reflection in the side mirror, a crumpled, sobbing heap at the gates of her own empty kingdom. She felt no pleasure in her pain. She felt only a profound, weary relief. The relief that comes when the truth has finally, after so long in the darkness, been brought into the light. When she arrived at Marcus's office, he greeted her with a proud, triumphant smile. The report is a firestorm, he said. It's being shared all over social media. We've already been contacted by lawyers representing other domestic workers from Victoria's social circle. You haven't just won your own battle, Leticia. You've started a movement. Leticia nodded, feeling the weight of 3 long years of silence, finally lifting from her shoulders. Justice wasn't sweet. It was necessary, and sometimes, for it to happen, it takes brave, intelligent, and incredibly patient people to go undercover, to document the truth. and to wait for the perfect moment for all the masks to come off. For good 6 months after the expos that rocked the American social elite, Dr. Leticia Santos sat in her new office in downtown Manhattan. The sign on the door read, "The Santos Institute for Social Justice and Labor Rights." The explosive news report, and the subsequent lawsuit, had sparked a national conversation about domestic racism and the hidden abuses within the homes of the wealthy. Prestigious universities had offered her professorships, publishers were in a bidding war for her research, and civil rights organizations had partnered with her to create the Institute, a powerful new organization dedicated to fighting for the rights of domestic workers across the country. Victoria Ashford, meanwhile, had lost almost everything. Husband, horrified by the public scandal and the financial ruin it had brought upon his company, had filed for divorce. The mansion had been sold to pay the massive settlement in the class action lawsuit that Leticia's case had spawned. Her friends, the Catherines and Rebeccas of the world, had shunned her, terrified of being tainted by her public disgrace. She now lived in a modest, rented apartment, her name a permanent synonym for elite, racist hypocrisy. But there had been an unexpected, and perhaps hopeful, turn. After months of court-mandated therapy and community service, Victoria had reached out to Leticia. She had offered a formal, public apology, and a donation of $50,000, or the money she had left after the legal battles, to the new institute. "It doesn't erase the past, Victoria," Leticia had told her firmly, "but it can be the first step toward building a different future for yourself." 2 years later, Victoria was working as a volunteer at a community center in the Bronx, teaching English to new immigrants. It was humble, unpaid work, but for the first time in her life, she was contributing to something larger than her own ego. Leticia's institute had become a national force for change, successfully lobbying for new laws protecting domestic workers, and winning landmark cases against other wealthy families who had believed themselves to be above the law. The truest victory, Leticia often told her students and colleagues, was not in the humiliation of Victoria Ashford. It was in the empowerment of the thousands of other Leticias of the world. It was in the creation of a system where their voices could no longer be ignored. On the wall of her office, there was a framed photograph. It was of her and James, Victoria's son, sitting at the small kitchen table in her old apartment, drawing. James, who was now in the custody of his paternal grandparents, visited her regularly. Away from the toxic, prejudiced environment of his mother's home, he was thriving. Next to the photo was a small, simple plaque. The Institute's motto, "The greatest revenge against prejudice is not to destroy those who discriminate. It is to build a world where discrimination is impossible." Victoria Ashford had tried to break Leticia Santos, but in doing so she had only succeeded in forging a leader, and Leticia, in turn, had learned that true justice is not about punishing those who have hurt us. It is about ensuring that no one else ever has to endure the same pain. Their story had become a powerful, enduring testament to the idea that when the privileged and the powerful underestimate the quiet, invisible people who move through their world, they are not just being cruel, they are digging their own moral, and often, literal, graves. Because in the end, those who have the courage to document the truth, and the intelligence to use it as a weapon, will always defeat those who use only arrogance and money.